I remember getting a phone call, or yeah, I guess it was a phone call from somebody out of California. I'm in Texas, and they're like, "Hey, we found you online. We'd like to know what your services are." They never would have found me if I didn't put forth this uber professional image online. I was working out of a closet, but they didn't know that. They didn't look that way.
Hey everyone, today I'm going to be speaking with Kyle McCaw out of McCaw Property Management. McCaw Property Management services Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and Kyle is one of the most impressive people that I've met in property management. He's successfully managed to scale his business to over 1,000 properties in under 12 years. He has a team that is dedicated to working with McCaw Property Management. He has, I believe, 2 to 3 salespeople. I think he has a wealth of knowledge that can really help you guys when it comes to growing your property management company and learning from his experience. So let's get straight into it.
First, thanks for having me on. Like I really appreciate that you let me share. And if I can give you value, then I'm just giving you back what you've given me. So I really appreciate the opportunity. How I got into in property management, it was one of those things where I knew I wanted to own rental properties. And if you're going to own rental properties, you know how to manage them. So I bought my first couple shortly after college. I think my first one I bought in 2002, and just made all the wrong decisions as far as management goes. I did it on my own. And then, looking at over the years, I just kind of kept doing it for myself. But then every once in a while, a family member would need help or whatever. And then I just kind of grew it. Then when the financial service industry pretty much crashed in is '09. I got a direct impact from that. And I woke up and I'm like, man, I need a business that is more stable. I need a business that has recurring revenue, one that's hedged for inflation, and that I have control. I don't have a corporate person up here that can just decide, oh, I don't like Kyle anymore. You're gone. Now I've got 1,000+ bosses, and I can get fired by one or two of them, but it's not going to impact my lifestyle. So that's kind of why I got into it, and that's how I got into it. Is like I had that wake up, like, hey, I need to do my own thing and have more control over my lifestyle. So that's how it happened.
Got it. So from my understanding, you were basically managing rental properties, and then one day you were like, I'm going to start a real business around this. Is that kind of
Yeah,
how?
so it was a hobby business, and it was my own stuff too that I was managing. So it was just here and there, like somebody needed some help, so I'd help them out. And then when my corporate job went away, I realized, man, didn't go away. I need to go and focus on it. And so what I did is I just doubled down and just focused on growing properties under management. And I realized, hey, I may make a couple of bucks a house, but if I can stack them deep, stack them tall, then eventually I can get my bills paid with it.
Got it. Got it. And did you like right now you service all of Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex. When you first started, were you in one market? Did you go after all of DFW? What did that look like?
Yeah, it was all a DFW because I'm like I was not in a position where I could turn down business. I mean, I was one of those like I needed to make a dollar because I had kids at home to feed and mortgages to pay, so I didn't turn down business. And I think that's a very common thing that property managers, they're taught from these books, tapes, and CDs, and all these people that say like, oh, if you're going to buy real property, buy it within 15 minutes of your house. Oh, so if you're going to be a property manager, you need to manage within 15 minutes of your office or 30 minutes within your office. Man, that's such a limited thought process. I think my thing is like, how do you expand that? And to me, is like, why can't, okay, if I got a mortgage with Citibank, there's no Citibanks around me, but they gave me a mortgage. So they can manage my mortgage, but they can't, like, I can manage a house that's 3 hours away, 2 hours away. Now you have to be smart about it. You've got to like have local vendors that can take care of, maintenance or things of that nature. But for the most part, you don't have to be at the house every week and drive by it. So, you can completely service a property outside of your 30-minute drive time. And I think nowadays, I think a lot more property managers have understood that you can leverage technology and resources more. But when I was first getting started, look, I was getting properties from other property managers who are like, well, I only deal with, Plano and Frisco only.
Got
And
it.
I've got a client that has 6 houses. You can manage these 2 houses over here in Hearst, and they want to manage the 6 that are in Frisco. Well, like, I'll take all 8. Like, so I didn't understand why they would self-limit themselves. So yeah, I never limited myself. So we do stuff outside DFW all day long.
Okay. So that's a completely different mindset than what most
Mhm.
property management companies do when starting out. Honestly, I've heard both sides of the table, so I think you can make it work either way.
Yeah,
But I guess
my
you're,
table's bigger.
yeah, but you're in a big market, right?
Yeah.
DFW. So when you're starting out, there's obviously tons of other property management companies out there that service the same market as well. How did you kind of differentiate yourself? How were you able to
Sure.
stand out? Like, why would they use Kyle McCaw or McCaw
Sure.
Property Management versus a
when
competitor?
when I was the guy that was closing business and having those conversations, I had extremely high close ratio. And the reason is because I could talk to them like an investor because I own rental properties. So I would tell them, hey, this is what I do for my houses. I treat yours the same as mine. This is what I do. And it added credibility and authority to me. And so like if there's two people, one property manager doesn't even own a rental house. They've just never really, they're just getting into the business to try and make a buck. Or you can go with Kyle McCaw, who owns rental properties, been there, done that, experiences the pain point when you have to pay too much for a hot water heater or, painting a property or, getting a bad tenant. Like I felt those pains that my clients felt. My competitors, they've never been on the receiving end of an invoice for maintenance. I have. So what happens is I understand like where to push back on these vendors. So I'm like, no, dude, you can't charge me that much. And for somebody that's never owned a rental property, like they just take that as, okay, well, that's just what it costs. And so I thought as an investor, not as I'm trying to make a buck. So what I told my clients is I'm looking at tenants as the ATM. That's where we're getting money from. I'm not looking at the property owner is where I'm getting the money from. So I'm not looking at the owners in ATM. I've had my properties that I own out of state in professional management by a third party before, and they just raked me over the coals. I'm like, man, y'all are just killing me on just everything, like overpaying for stuff, feeding me to death, everything. I'm like, that's just not the way to build clients. And if I can protect my clients' income stream, man, that allows them to buy more properties and they just keep going. And so I've had a really high success rate of clients that just kept bringing me houses because we're doing a good job.
Okay. And I guess on that note, so now you have clients that are bringing you houses, but to get to your first 100 properties under management, what did that look like? I'm sure like when you started day one, you mentioned you already own some properties,
Right.
but now you have to go out there and actually get other people to
Uh,
let you
so
manage stuff.
now this was a few years ago. So if you remember, you probably heard of a thing called Google Ads, and it was like super easy to get
Yep.
leads through Google Ads back in 08, 9, 10. And so when I lost my job, I sat down on my lazy boy in the living room and cracked open my laptop, got an Excel spreadsheet, and I figured out, I can create a couple of AdWord accounts and just put AdWord, you know, I guess that's what it's called, just AdWord
Yep.
campaigns
It used
together.
to
Yeah, and I knew that for every $50 that I'd put into a campaign, I would get a lead. And I knew for every 3 leads, I'd get at least one client. So I knew for every $150 I spent, I'd get a client. So I just reverse engineered, like I got X amount of dollars in bills I got to pay every month. And so I would just crank it. So I was just living off of my savings and I was just putting every dollar I could into Google ads. And then I was also using all property management leads,
Yep.
buying leads. I don't even know. They're around, but their business model really skewed not into my favor after a few years. But for a while there, man, I was just, for every 50 bucks, I'd get a lead and I was crushing it.
So
And
from
then
day
that
one,
changed.
from day one, you were willing to spend money to actually grow your business.
Yeah.
It wasn't
So,
just like boots on the ground type of style. It was
well,
I'm gonna spend on marketing and I'm gonna make sure that I track my return.
right. You can have boots on the ground, but if you don't have anywhere to go, then doesn't do you good. So you gotta generate those leads somehow. And go into the real estate investor clubs and all that. None of those people don't have money. That's why they're there. They're trying to figure out how to do it. So how do you get in front of these owners? And that was how I did it early on was
So
through
I
the ad.
guess over time, like once you were, I'm sure it became that much easier once you had 100 plus doors, 200, 300 to spend to acquire new properties to manage. What were some of the other methods that have been the most successful for you in terms of bringing on new doors to manage?
Sure. So there's a few, but your services have been a huge piece of that growth for us.
Appreciate
And where that's been is, there's all these companies that will sell you a website. Well, I needed somebody that could sell a website that was specific to property management and understood our target. So, for example, everybody that wants to put together a website for you, like they do it for the gas station down the street or the tire salesman or the pest control company or the home service business. Like, well, the problem is all of those people that create those websites, they're focused on, the Google map. Like they just think that you're looking for people around you. Like, no, my clients could be sitting in 5 states, they could be in another country. So I need to be visible to people that aren't here. So I need a property management website that understands that my SEO needs to target more than just the local guy. And so with you, I know that you understood that when you do ads for me too, and you do all these things, you understood that I needed more content to generate SEO to get people to me. And that's I would say that's a big piece of my growth is like, so I got to the 100, I was able to afford like investing because you weren't free, you cost money, and you weren't the cheapest in town, you weren't the most expensive, you're the best value. And so we spent that money and it was well spent. Um, and we've gone a little above and beyond what I think some of my other competitors do because I keep seeing the value of like the more I invest in my online presence, the more I am visible. And I know you've helped me a lot with Google reviews. That's been a huge piece because the more Google reviews you have, the more authority you have, and that's been a great thing. So I'd say that's a big piece of it. A lot of referrals and just being
Yeah.
professional.
So from what it sounds like, you went big into online marketing. That basically helped you start to generate more leads, start to bring on new properties. And then over time, because you brought on new properties, that eventually starts to lead to more referrals because word of mouth gets around. Would that kind of sum up just a bit?
Absolutely. I remember when we were early on with your services, we were in a little bitty closet of an office. And I remember getting a phone call, or yeah, I guess it was a phone call from somebody out of California. I'm in Texas. And they're like, hey, we found you online. We'd like to know what your services are. They never would have found me if I didn't put forth this uber professional image online. I was working out of a closet, but they didn't know that. It didn't look that way. So there was a lot to that on how you present yourself. We earned that client. I've done a lot of business with them. I think they started with, well, they were a good client. I had another one out of Arizona that was very similar, that was just buying houses left and right and just keep throwing them to us to manage. And they've sold off, but they keep referring people to us. So yeah, that referral business, that's huge. Be professional, treat everybody right, be open, honest to them. You'll get more business.
I guess from an operational standpoint, you've obviously scaled up quite a bit.
Sure.
What were some of the main problems you encountered? Let's say once you hit 100 doors, 300 doors, whatever that door mark was, where you started to kind of realize like things are going off the rail.
Right. So I've always been uber ambitious when it came to the business because I was like, I need to make sure that this thing works. And if you're not growing, you're dying. And so you get to a certain point. I think most property managers, from what I understand, what I've seen out there, is like 100 was their cap. Like you can only do 100 houses. That's a little few years ago. I think technology has helped raise that. But then they're like, I can do 100. The thing is they're living off that 100, the revenue off that 100, so they can't afford to invest in other staff. So what I did is I'm like, I can't handle all the maintenance. I can't handle all of the owner statements and focus on bringing on accounts and leasing up these properties. So that about that 100 mark, that's where you have to hire somebody to help. Nowadays you can have VAs, maybe somebody in the office, but somebody to handle the work while you're out, because when you're out, you can't do the work. So that was one hurdle. The next hurdle, several hundred houses, then it's like, hey, I need dependable vendors. And so having in-house maintenance staff, that's the biggest frustration and the biggest blessing at the same time, because you can have control over their schedule, their quality, how they treat people, their background checks, workman's comp, all of these things that are super important that you can show the value to our clients in that regard. That was a big hurdle that helped. Um, a little, I don't, I'm not sure where I hired my first business development manager. Um, that was probably around the 300 mark, maybe 400 mark.
Okay.
And that was where I was able to say, hey, you're going to answer these leads and you're going to sign up these accounts. That was game changing to me because it wasn't all on my shoulders to bring in the accounts. Now, yes, their close ratio is not going to be as high as mine starting out. Like if I was closing 50% and they were closing 25, well, man, I understand. I still have to keep giving those leads to that person because that 25% close ratio will only get better with time.
Yeah.
And so I
So
can't say, oh, well, I'm going to take them because I have a higher close ratio. No, you got to 80% done is done sometimes. So, outsource that to somebody early on, train them up. That close ratio, I'm going to say my first BDM, she's still with me, significantly higher than what it was when she first came on. She's a rock star. And then my second, and then the thing is you're going to get you can start absorbing some bad bets. So the thing is you can invest in a hire, maybe they don't work out, but you have to be able to weather that. So that's where when you get to more units, you have a little bit more free cash flow to where you, I don't want to say gamble or swing for the fences, but you can make more calculated bets. And so, I've got two people that their main function is to go out and get property management accounts. Um, I've
what do
had
they do on a daily basis? Like, are they
oh,
handling only inbound leads? Are they
inbound leads.
inbound leads?
Their personalities are not outgoing as much as I'm going to say I would like, but they're very good at taking care of clients, showing that we're professional, showing that we care. Um, they're in charge of onboarding accounts, making sure that all the paperwork's proper, making sure that the rental comps are ran properly, making sure it's marketed, photographs are ordered, everything to kind of get it up and running. And then
Okay,
my office staff can handle everything after that. But
got it.
they're in charge of that bit. And basically problem solving for people. So that they don't even have time to go out and get accounts outside because there's just leads coming in.
Yeah. It helps when you have a lot of inbound leads.
Yeah.
You don't have to do too much outbound, I guess, if you can keep them completely occupied with what you've got
Yeah.
coming in. On the note of hiring, I usually like to say find someone that can do the task at 80% of the capacity that you can. And then over time, when this is the only area of the business they're focused on, they're going to end up able to do it at 120%
Yeah.
of the capacity you're able
Yeah.
to do it
Because
at.
even if they're at 80%, but they can give 100% of their time towards it, that's still better than me getting 100% at 50% of my time.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things. You just know that, sometimes your dollar invested pays back more than a dollar. Sometimes it's $1.50, sometimes it's $2. Like, heck, if as long as it's more than a dollar comes back to you, it's a good bet. So take it.
And I guess now, while you're scaling up, like to determine when you have to hire somebody new, do you have, let's say, a schedule and it's like, okay, for every 75 properties we need to add on a new property manager, or how do you guys look at that?
That's a great question. I think that's how a lot of people manage their business is on that property management manager business model. I chose not to go that route. I chose, I worked in corporate world. I worked at consulting firms, I worked at financial firms, and I understood like departmentalizing, certain functions of a big project. And if you had somebody really good at one function and you had somebody else good at the other function, those two people can get more done than two people trying to do both things on their own on those for the same amount of work. So with my thing is I've got an office staff that just does specifically maintenance coordination. I've got office staff that just do um, processing applications, communicating with new tenants, getting all that set up. It's all departmentalized, so I can do a whole lot more. What happens is those people are experts, like they are experts. That's all they do. So I get a whole lot more done with less people. So when some people say, "Oh, well, you need to hire somebody every 100 houses," not necessarily. I may need to cross train a few people to kind of like weather out some bumps, but no, it's not that. Now, when I was bringing on property, like my business development managers, I told myself I can financially afford to hire somebody with this salary, and if they bring in this amount of houses, but I need to get to a certain point so I can afford that. And
Yeah.
that was really the only time I really thought about number of doors mattering. I was like, hey, if I can get 60 more doors, I can go afford to hire another business manager, business development manager. And that worked out.
You also have I don't want to mistitle him. Let's call it the COO or director of operations.
Right.
And he handles. We'll give a shout out to Jeff here, but he handles
Yeah, he's amazing.
a lot of your business, right? To the
Yeah,
point where even emailing you, you don't even answer your own emails, type of
I
thing.
know. No,
Um, how did you get to that point? Like, what was it
man,
that?
that was for one, that was a blessing. So sometimes you come across people that are just they stand out. They're amazing people. You just know them. You've been, you go places and you see people like, man, that person knows what they're doing. They're great. They're smart. They care. You've come across those people in your life, and you may not have a role for them, but you're like, dude, I want them on my bus,
Yeah.
and I wanted him on my bus. Yeah. Man, it was so when that corporate world went away, I did a project with a consulting firm, and he was my boss. And then so the project went away, so we were both unemployed. And then that's when I was really hustling on property management. And I remember reaching out to him, I was like, "Hey Jeff, if you're looking for something, man, I need some help." And he's like, "Well, what do you got?" I'm like, "I don't really have anything like per se, and I can't really afford to pay you much, but can you help me out?" And he's like, "Well, okay." And I mean, he literally was just doing just crap work like maintenance, garbage disposal, just what handyman stuff. I mean, he grew up on a farm, so he knew what he's doing. But man, then my bookkeeper like just went bonkers because she couldn't handle all the work, and then she quit. And I went, Jim, like, "Jay, Jeff, can you do this?" He's like, "Yeah." And so he just stepped in, and then it just grew and grew. And man, that was the biggest turning point was that when I brought him on board, is because you hire A class players, you get A class work done.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so that comes down to that departmentalized business model. Is he is an expert in all the COO functions, and he also does HR. And then I've got a director of other things. So I mean, you just got it's one of those things that you just got to hire good people when you see them. You just
Yeah.
go for it.
At this point, like to manage 1,000 plus properties, what's your or approximately what's your headcount?
27's payroll right now. Now my business is very different than I'm not going to say any other property manager, but mine's very different. I've got a lot of um, talent. I've got, my property management. I'm a traditional property management that you would think of, but then I also have an in-house maintenance company. And then I also have a third party, like a general contracting company. So we're out there rehabbing houses for clients. So we'll have clients that come to us because if they find the deal, we can execute the whole deal for them. Like from like, hey, bring me a house that you can see through. I'll have my team go over there, bid it, rehab it. It'll be perfect. We'll put tenants in it, and then we'll rent it, and then we'll just take care of it. And so they'll come to me for that. So I've got um, crews that all they're doing is rehabbing houses, project managing houses. I've got some, I'm in Dallas Fort Worth. We have hailstorms all the time, so I've got roofing crews. I've got it all. So it seems really heavy, staff heavy, but in reality, I'm still looking for some people.
Yeah, I mean, you're also doing more than just property management. You're literally kind of like a one-stop shop for someone who wants to invest in the DFW market, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. So I mean, it's one of those things where I you have companies that grow by buying or getting new property accounts, and they're just like, "Hey, I'm just going to be property manager." I was looking at my P&L, and I'm like, "Man, I paid that punk $400,000 last year. I'm going to do that this year." And then so that's what I did. I'm like, "Well, I'm internalizing that and turn that expense into a profit center." And then so
mhm.
that's what I did. And so that's how I've grown, not just door count wise, but revenue wise. Like it's good. So it's when and that's where I think a turning point is with property management is like you have so many things that you can help a client with the larger you are.
Yeah,
So when I was doing 30 or 40 houses and I called an HVAC company, they're like, "Who are you?" "Yeah, we'll put you in the line, next Thursday we can get you." No. When I call now, I've got one HVAC company, and they are third party because they're freaking good at what they do, and I love those people. Um, Man, they're doing 2,500 services for my company a year. And so
Yes.
When I pick up the phone call, they're like, I'm on, they go like they go like they will be at a tenant's house fixing a problem before I get into my office that morning because they treat us good because I built their business for them. They're really
Yeah.
good at what they do,
Yeah.
and that relationship's there. So I carry weight now, and that there's things that come with that volume.
Got it. Got it. So if you were to go back in time, right? Let's go back to early 2010s. Um, what would be one thing that you would change that you think would have the biggest impact on helping you succeed at a faster pace?
Man, my mind's always going 100 miles an hour. Like, how can I improve? How can I improve? How can I grow? How can I grow? So, looking back, I would have liked to have leveraged more on the VA business model earlier on than I did. And I,
When you say VA, just to make sure, virtual
virtual
assistant.
assistant,
Yeah.
virtual assistant. So I've got right now I have four. I've had five, but one guy like he had to go off and do something else, and I haven't replaced him yet. But so I've got four people that sit in Mexico, and there's all these stereotypes and stigmas that people have on having a remote employee. Throw those stigmas out the window because that's not the way it is. All four of my people, and I'm going to say five because one had to leave recently. All of them have lived in the United States more than 10 years each. One of my guys lived like the city over, like from where I live now. He grew up there. He just decided like he was a Mexican citizen, had his green card and everything. He's like, man, Mexico was where he preferred to live. And so he works remote there. And like he's referred business from people he went to school with when he lived here. So I mean, these are
Really?
like just because they're somewhere else doesn't mean they don't understand or can't capable or not as good. They're very good. They're very capable. And if they are a little less expensive as far as dollars per hour, but you give up zero on quality. And if I'm going to say honestly, in today's world, I get higher qualities work, more buy-in, more loyalty from my remote staff initially than a local staff hire. If I would have just hired somebody today for that would come in because they
Yeah.
are so appreciative. I pay more than what they get paid locally. So if I paid them exact same dollar somebody that walked in the door here, they are still less of they're still a better deal because of the work they do, the quality and how much they put into it, but also payroll taxes, just all these things that just eat up, unemployment tax. There's all these things that eat up your money when it comes to being an employer. And
Yeah.
from a
You
VA route,
basically, yeah, you basically don't have to deal with any of those headaches.
yeah.
You generally get someone who's super appreciative for the opportunity and will do anything to make sure they don't mess it up.
Yeah.
And overall, I think you just end up with a harder working team member that's really like down to be part of the journey.
Oh yeah. Like more than one occasion, they've gone out on their own and created McCaw Property Management shirts, hats,
Really?
backdrops. They didn't have to. They did that on their own dime. So that tells me a lot. Like how many people can say they worked at a company where an employee went out on their own and had a t-shirt screen printed of the company they work at? Like that just doesn't happen very much.
Yeah.
So for them to do that's amazing. And no, I mean, Ricardo, you may have dealt with him. He's been with us for 3.5 years. I know Jeff, my COO, he went down there and spent New Year's with him.
What are some of the tasks that you have the virtual assistants work on?
Well, they can't put lock boxes on houses, but they can do just about everything else. So they
Okay.
can they can work on owner statements, they can do maintenance coordination, they can schedule um, showings, they can answer basic phone calls. They they do manage your Facebook, social media. I have them audit just anything you imagine. Like, hey, I need to make sure that all my tenants have liability insurance is all up to date. Eric, please take care of going through all their accounts, make sure they're all, and they can do that. You name it, like just anything you can imagine, they can do it.
Anything you can give to someone in the US,
Yeah,
you can pretty much give to them as long as they don't need to physically be there, like going to
right.
actually visit the property.
Mhm.
So yeah, like people have to kind of start to realize you don't need someone that's local. You need someone that is ambitious and
Mhm.
that has the ability to learn.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to. So I guess last question for you: any departing words of advice you have for other aspiring property management companies or other property management company owners out there that are looking to grow to 1,000 doors, that maybe are at the earlier stage of their journey, that are maybe sub 500 doors?
So one thing that's really made my company stand out, and I think has really played to my advantage, is anybody that's worked or come in contact with my office knows that we're professional and that we care. Like that's the I want everybody to know when they've had contact with the McCaw Property Management and I'm talking from maintenance to maintenance crews out in the field to somebody in the office. If you've dealt with a McCaw Property Management employee, I want you to come back and say, man, they're a professional and they care about what they do and who they are working with. So we take care of our tenants, we take care of our owners, we take care of each other. So that's the big piece is you've got to build that into your culture that you're a professional and you care. Like so when somebody talks to one of my business development staff and they get off the phone, there's going to be a follow-up that they wouldn't have got from another company. Like, hey, I'm physically sending you in the mail a very professional folder that's customized, that has inserts that are all customized, that talks about our services so they get a touch feel in addition to the phone call. They're going to get a follow-up, they get text. So they're going to know that they're dealing with somebody that really if they take that good of care and bringing in a client and letting them know how professional we are, how good are they going to be at managing a business and managing rental properties? Pretty good.
That's good advice for sure.
So yeah, we stand out in that regard. I think that's a big deal is like invest in I don't want to, when you say invest in your image, it's not a shallow term. It's not like I got to wear a Gucci watch. It's, let people know that you're for real. You're not doing this because, man, I got to do something for work. Like it's this or work at the drive-through. Like, no, this is my profession. This is what I do. I build wealth and I build income through rental properties for my clients.
Invest in the experience that someone
Yeah,
has from the second they pick up the phone and speak with you from the first time to the point
yep,
where they've been a client of yours for years.
yeah.
Make sure that they know at
So
every point they're cared for, but also that every piece of material they get like speaks to your professionalism.
absolutely. And I think that paired with my website, paired with my videos that we put out there, paired with my podcast, everything comes together and says these guys are professionals. They know what they're doing.
Awesome.
And you gotta walk the business. Like, don't be a property manager and not buy rental houses. Like, you wouldn't want to go to a stockbroker or an Ed Jones broker and say and they don't own any they don't own any stocks. I mean,
Yeah.
you got to believe in what you're selling, and that comes across to people when you believe in what you're selling and you're buying it yourself. They're gonna like, hey, I'm gonna hitch my wagon to the guy that's doing it, not some guy that's selling it. Like just
There you
yeah,
go. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing,
absolutely.
Kyle. For any of our listeners that would like to connect with you, do you have anywhere that they can go to reach out to you, to reach out to
Sure.
McCaw Property Management?
Sure. Obviously, we have a website, mccawpropertymanagement.com. That's one place they can see us, and they'll see a lot of information there too. Um, LinkedIn profile, I'm there. I'm trying to be more aggressive on that. Also, I've got a podcast, and it's how real estate changed my life. And I think that's another thing that's really added value. And I've noticed that I've had more clients with more money that don't own a real house yet reach out to me because they heard that podcast, because somebody referred it to them. So you got to be out there. You got to be an expert in your field. You got to own it. Like, if you're going to do something as a profession, invest in your knowledge base and be the guy out there that's an expert.
Hey, awesome.
That's
Thank you so much, Kyle.
absolutely. Thank you for all you do for us too.
We'll talk soon.
Thanks.